See Beneath Your Beautiful podcast is raw and intimate, sometimes funny, and always entertaining. With new episodes every Saturday, Hara explores our loves, fears, and hopes with a delicious combination of depth and lightness.
My name is Jeremy Whittington, and I am the managing artistic director at Stage Left Theater here in Spokane, Washington. I have had a varied history of ups and downs in life. I'm in recovery, and I've been clean and sober for 12 and a half years. I have a kid that I adopted. It's my nephew, actually. I adopted him when he was 13, and now he's grown and married and have a grandbaby now.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. I've been dating my partner, Alex, for just over 2 years, 2 years last week, actually. So that's a little brief overview of who I am.
Do you want to talk about it all about how you got your nephew? How'd that happen?
Sure. I'll give a little bit of history about what even brought me to Spokane in the first place, which kind of ties into that story. I come from a loving family, awesome, no abuse, no alcohol in the house. My dad actually was a Southern Baptist minister for a long time. I was born in Long Beach, California, and then was raised my early years in a little town called Sugar Grove, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in third grade, he was called to be a minister. So we moved to New Orleans, where he studied at the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary for 3 years. And while we were there, I got to attend a gifted program for arts, drama, and music. It's kind of like, if you remember the show Fame back from the 80s.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Yes.
Yeah, it was that school, but in New Orleans. And I got to go there from third through sixth grade, which was pretty cool. It was such a cool experience to be surrounded by, other artists at such a young age.
Yeah.
And then my dad got his first church assignment, and it was in a tiny, tiny town called Hobson, Alabama. And that was devastating for me. I was just coming out of being an art student in New Orleans, and now I'm a sixth grader in Hobson, Alabama. And so I kind of went into a little bit of depression there. That's when I kind of started coming out as gay as well.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't come out to my parents or anything, but I started sharing those things with some close friends. We were there for a year, and then we moved back to the Ohio area, little various towns. My dad would start mission churches all over Southern Ohio. So for a while, I didn't finish any school that I started the same year at. So I was very transitory in my growing up,
mm-hmm.
which allowed me to kind of be whoever I wanted to be. I was kind of a social chameleon, but it didn't allow me to get any roots. I didn't have any friends for very long. So I was very much like inside my own head.
Yeah.
Which I think eventually contributed to a lot of my alcoholism and addiction behaviors. I didn't do any drugs or alcohol until after I graduated high school. I was a really good kid, quote unquote, good kid.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get into much trouble. I did very well in school. I ended up getting a full ride scholarship to Ohio University for whatever field I wanted to go into. And my first quarter there, I met my first boyfriend, Vic Schonk. Fell head over heels. He was a musician and an actor and a tech director at the theater. And I decided that I was going into theater too. That's what got me involved in theater in the first place, was that very first love. It didn't last very long, but he's a great guy. And we're actually still friends to this day, which is kind of cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was back in 1989, to date myself a little bit. I just turned 50.
Oh, okay. I was just going to ask. I'm almost 54, so.
Oh, wow. So we look good.
Well, I'm keeping that in. That's awesome. That's not being edited.
So my freshman year of college, I started sneaking into the gay bars in Columbus, Ohio, and was introduced to drugs, cocaine, from a drag queen there at one of the drag shows. And that set me off on a path of self-destruction and mental instability and ruined relationships and not talking to my family for years, not out of any kind of spite or anything. Just that lifestyle doesn't allow for you to make real, honest connections with anyone, including family. So my 20s and early 30s were really an increasing blur of just a cacophony of drug use and self-abuse and depression, anxiety. I moved from Ohio. I followed my parents out here to Washington State, where my dad had got a little church up in Republic, little tiny town up in Republic. And then they moved down to Spokane. So I followed them here. And that's what kind of ended me up in Spokane, was escaping a bad relationship, trying to get away from this cocaine addiction that I had. And sure enough, geography had nothing to do with any of my issues. I found exactly what I needed here in the world of drugs too. So that sent me on a downward spiral. Soon after I moved here, my mom passed away. She was 46 years old and had a brain tumor that was discovered randomly through a headache. She had a headache and went to the doctor, and they did an immediate brain surgery, and she passed away from ICU complications. The surgery actually went well. So I was devastated. She was my biggest cheerleader all my life. And she was the one that, even though she didn't really understand that I was gay and approve of that, she never hesitated to, show me that unconditional love and, really support my art, really. She always knew that there was something special about me in terms of art. When she died, I went off the deep end, and I just got involved in crystal meth and ecstasy and all of those party drugs. And I was bartending and cocktailing at Dempsey's, a local bar here, and Pumps too. So I went through that whole range of crazy gay drug abuse that was so popular back then. Yeah, you just go to the clubs and get messed up mentally, and whatever happened kind of thing.
Yeah.
Again, just a lifestyle of no real, honest, true connections with people. And it's lonely.
Yeah.
I think that part of what that culture did for me and does for others too was to give me a sense of belonging. Even though it was destructive belonging, it kind of gave me that, oh, I found my tribe kind of feeling, that we all seek as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
That went on for years. I think in 2004, when I didn't have my own apartment, I was couch surfing between friends and my sister. I ended up on my sister's couch. I think that's when she finally got the full brunt of realization that, oh my gosh, my brother is messed up. And she told me that I needed to do something. And what did I want to do? She was really loving. I said, well, I can't move anywhere because that clearly doesn't change things. That was my first realization, is that geography is just geography. Wherever you go, there you are,
Yeah.
So I decided to go into rehab, and I checked myself into Spark rehab centers here in Spokane. And it was awesome. They were great people. It was a 28-day inpatient program. I learned a lot about addiction and alcoholism and what it looks like and where it stems from. And the day I got out, I was doing drugs again.
Mm-hmm.
That very day.
My brother was in and out of jail and did drugs and came out and died the day he came out of a drug overdose. So I totally get it that even though you're hearing the information, you're still waiting for the next hit, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What I've realized, and this is talked about a lot in recovery, is that self-knowledge is never going to be the answer. I can know that I'm, addicted to this substance and not be able to do anything about it. I think if you're not an addict or an alcoholic, you don't quite understand that component of what addiction looks like. Because shouldn't you be able to stop if you've lost everything? No. I mean, yeah, you should, but you can't. That's not how addiction works.
So if it's not self-knowledge, what is it?
What it's been for me is, I went through NA and AA. I found my recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous. To back up just a little bit before I answer that, when I got out of rehab, I'd been working at Cyrus O'Leary's restaurant as a server before that, and lost my job because I missed 3 days of work, as addicts do. Mm-hmm. And when I got out of rehab, I called the boss up because they were hiring again. And I said, can I get my job back? And he said, no. And I said, well, thank you for talking me into going into rehab, which he had. Mm-hmm. And he goes, oh, you really did that? I was like, yeah. And he goes, okay, we'll come back in.
Oh, okay.
So I went back into work for him, not as a server because I didn't want money in my pocket all the time, but as an expediter where you garnish the food and send it out with the servers. Within 6 months, I was his associate general manager. I rose very quickly. I've always, had a pretty good go of rising in the ranks of whatever I'm attempting to do, even when I messed up mentally and spiritually. But over that time, from getting out of rehab until when I finally got sober 5 years later, my drug use decreased quite a bit because I knew I learned some things in rehab. And I knew that I was killing myself, literally physically killing myself. So I switched to alcohol and didn't realize that that had then taken over my life in such a dramatic way. By the time the mid 2000s were coming around, I was drinking excessively often to blackout and didn't think that that was a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate enough that I had a roommate who asked me to take her to an AA meeting because she knew I went to rehab. And I took her to an AA meeting and she has been clean and sober ever since. So now 16 years.
Awesome.
I didn't get clean and sober at that time. I was just very happy that I could help someone else out and it felt good. And she moved away and then came back a year later and was a completely changed person. And she was in college and she was getting married and all of these interesting things. And that was attractive to me. But I still didn't realize that alcohol had really taken over my life. So in February of 2009, I was sitting down at the Sukiyaki Inn where we drank all the time. And it was after hours. They let us stay there because we were restaurant people and they knew we tipped really well. And I was high on some cocaine again and drinking excessively and wasted. And I was sitting there with my best friend, Jesse. And he looked at me across the table and he says, "I think you're an alcoholic." And that was the first time that word, I knew I was a drug addict, but I thought I had it under control, but I never associated alcoholism with what my problem was. And in that moment, there was this realization, oh my gosh, I am an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. And he and I agreed as best friends to quit drinking. And he went to shake my hand to agree on it. And I said, well, no, not right now. I said, we have to wait till the first of the month because I quit cigarettes on the first of the month. I quit methamphetamines on the first of the month. So it has to be the first of the month. So we agreed to quit on March 1st and we did. We quit drinking on March 1st, 2009, but I was never going to stop smoking weed. So I was smoking weed from the minute I got up to the minute I went to bed because my head was stir crazy without the alcohol. I didn't know how to calm myself down or live in my own thoughts, really. And I woke up on March 11th, passed out on my living room floor in a puddle of vomit to a phone call from Aero Cab Company. And they said that I owed them $14 because they picked me up on the corner of the Satellite Diner, passed out, and they took me home and I didn't have any money to pay them. And they had done that so many times, countless times over the years.
Wow.
So I knew them and they knew me, but this time I didn't have any money. So I looked at my bank account and I had spent $340 at the bars the night before. And I do not remember, seriously, I do not remember even deciding to have a drink.
Yeah.
No memory of that to this day. So that's when I knew that I had to remove all substances from my plate. Mm-hmm. On March 17th, 2009, I went to my first real AA meeting, my first real attempt to change completely, and haven't had a drink or drug since. The year before that, though, my nephew had gotten into some legal trouble, and my sister, I think, was just at her wit's end. He was 13, almost 14. He had been staying with my dad and his new wife, and they were very, as they are, spiritual and church-driven people. And Corbin, my nephew, was not like that. He just wasn't built that way. And so I took him and got custody of him, and he became mine. And that was before I got clean and sober. So he saw the last year of my drinking and went through the worst of that, seeing his uncle just destroy himself. I didn't get sober for him. I really didn't. I got sober for myself. Mm-hmm. I knew that I was killing myself eventually. But I'm so glad that I got sober while I had him.
Yeah.
It helped me be able to communicate with him about what drugs and alcohol really do to you. And I told him from a young age, I'm like, look, come to me with any questions you have about drugs. I'll tell you the good parts of them and the bad parts of them. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to say don't do drugs, because I think that's, at this point in his life, would be naive of me to say. Mm-hmm. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. So I just vowed that I would always be honest with him about everything. And he and I have been honest with each other he's 27 now. So.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, we've always been able to communicate about whatever. And been the best and the most challenging part of my life was suddenly, I'm a confirmed bachelor who was never going to settle down and suddenly had a teenager in the house.
Yeah.
It was really interesting.
It's interesting that your sister, even though you were deep in your addiction, you were still a better choice.
Well, my sister had moved back to Ohio at that point, so he was staying with my dad.
He wasn't going to go back to Ohio anyway.
No. So the choice was between, me and my dad. And my dad did his best with him too,
Was your dad always accepting of you?
Yes, I always felt the unconditional love from my dad. But, there had been times where I dated girls in my adult life, and I think he was very excited about that notion. Mm-hmm. Thinking that I might have been going through a phase. And I am pansexual. I've discovered a lot of things about myself over the years, as we do,
Yeah.
But I can tell you now that my dad is one of my best friends and biggest supporters. He never hesitates to tell me how proud he is of me. He's met a past boyfriend of mine, and he really wants to meet Alex.
Awesome.
He's back in Ohio now too.
Mm-hmm.
All of my family except Corbin and I are back in Ohio, so we're the only ones out here. But my sister and her boys came out and met Alex, and she's always been super accepting. She's one of the first people I came out to when I was younger. So what bothers me or has always got under my skin about certain religious beliefs and practices is this notion that I get to judge what other people's journey looks like. Even if I don't agree, even if I think they're quote unquote sinning, right? Whatever that word means to anyone.
Right.
The notion that I get to be in a position to judge what that looks like for someone else has always bothered me and always felt very hypocritical. So I stopped going to church at 14 and I've gone back to different churches over the years, and I've sought different connections with God in different ways in my adult life and in my sobriety. And so that kind of brings me to that answering your question about what finally did it. And, the AA program, not to kind of promote that or anything like that, because there's different ways that people find sobriety for sure. But it taught me about connecting with a higher power that I can do business with, that I can find, that I can relate to, that is there for me, and just a personal relationship with a higher power. And that's what really, I think, flipped that switch in my head, that I'm just human. And I tried for literally decades to try to control my behavior. I always had a sense of God growing up. I always thought God hated gay people, so I am damned to hell. That was my notion that had been preached to me for years. And so this idea that I get to explore what God looks like personally to me and to develop a new sense of relationship with that higher power was something I just had never thought of. I never considered that could be how spirituality works. Mm-hmm. And so I spent a lot of time in my early recovery exploring what I thought God looked like. I went to different kinds of churches. I went to different spiritual practices. I read a lot of books, and not that anyone has to do any of that. I think that God, using a term that we can all just agree on as higher power, kind of makes themselves available to anyone that seeks them, whatever path that looks like. Mm-hmm. And I 100% can appreciate what people find in any religion, whether it's Catholicism, Christian, Judeo practices, Hinduism, Buddhism. All of these things for me are ways that people find to connect to a power greater than themselves.
Right.
That notion has evolved and changed in many ways over these 13 years of recovery, but it's always been, and I hope always remains, personal to me. God and I are a team now, and it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks about that, which is different for me. I was always worried about other people's conception of their God judging me, and now I don't have to worry about that anymore. I live in communion really on a daily basis with a higher power that accepts and loves me. And I hope everyone finds that, whatever that journey looks like for anyone.
Yeah.
Whether it's organized religion or no religion at all, or atheism or whatever, I hope people find a connection to something bigger than themselves, because that's what really allowed me to give up control of trying to run the show all the time, especially in addiction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
After I got sober, I went back to college and got some degrees in design and kind of landed magically in theater again.
I went through a divorce, and I grew up a non-practicing Jew. meaning both my parents were Jewish, but no, I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And right after my divorce, I got a job, and the owner of the place I worked at was a pastor at a small church. And I remember him asking me to come to the group. And I was like, I can't go. I'm Jewish. Like, I'm not allowed there. And so I did start going, and we had weekly in-house meetings besides church on weekends. And at the same time, because I was going through a divorce, I was very stressed out. And so I was seeing a counselor, and he had me on some medicine, and I was still drinking while I was on this medicine that I wasn't supposed to be drinking on. And so he sent me to AA. Anyway, one of the things that I always thought was so interesting was that everybody in AA was just willing to lay it out there and go, I'm struggling, I'm not perfect. And in comparison to the church group, where everybody was perfect that week and nobody was real. And I just always really appreciated that. And another thing I really appreciated was them saying a higher power, because I could get on board with that.
Yeah. Yep.
But like you're saying, just something bigger than myself, because I didn't know God yet. I didn't grow up with it. I really, really appreciated that about AA. Yeah,
me too. The idea that each person's conception of God can be different, like every single person's conception can be different, was an astounding revelation to me.
Oh, Yeah. Because you grew up with a Baptist father, because that's what it was. That was the way it was.
Absolutely. That's the way it was.
Yeah.
I believed it.
Yeah.
I believed it. Even coming out as gay, and even in my addiction alcoholism, I believed that what I'd been taught was the only way and the only right way to connect with God. And that's okay. That's what I believed. I've accepted that about myself, but I'm so much happier and freer to love other people in a real, genuine way. And like you said, there's that rawness, right? That I don't have to shy away from telling these stories. I'm not afraid of talking about the bad things I've done in my past either. There's just,
right.
Or what I'm going through in the moment. I'm not afraid of that anymore. I live in that moment. I accept it for what it is. I share it with other people whose opinions and love I accept and trust. And that to me is how God works, is connection with other people.
Yeah. You know what I think is so interesting is that you were saying, and I feel this way too, actually, that your relationship with God is something you were almost more scared to talk about than the other things, which I have found that to be true so much for myself.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's actually taken years for me to feel comfortable sharing what I think about the realm of the spirit, if you will, or I even use the term magic. For me, there's something bigger than the physical realm that's undeniable. And I'm not afraid to talk about that anymore. And I'm not afraid to learn about it anymore. I'm not afraid to share what I've experienced and to genuinely hear what somebody else has experienced and process that. Right.
Yeah.
We're just a big human organism living on this planet anyway. We're all one connected thing. And so much of what countries and governments and financial situations and race and religion does is divide us. It really takes away that interconnectivity that I think that when we get back to, even if it's on a small communal level, is so much more rewarding than trying to think of how I'm different than someone else.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I think growing up with no religion did for me was I saw that religion. I thought, oh, that's cool. And that one, and that's cool. And that one, and that's cool. And no religion, that's cool. I feel like I was open to it all because I didn't have a doctrine to live by.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I think whatever gets you through the day.
Right.
So what do you think some people can get through life without being an addict or drinking or doing drugs. What do you think kept you there for so long? It couldn't have been, well, you did the drugs and they were great, because they aren't great at some point, right?
True.
Is there something that you thought about yourself that you have now think differently about yourself? Like, is there some healing that you had?
Oh, absolutely. I think the combination of growing up gay in a small rural Southern community and having a Southern Baptist minister for a father and being scholastically exceptional is what, I would say. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying that, wherever I went, I rose to the scholastic occasion. And in academia, I was considered quite intelligent. Having that concoction of ego and also of this shame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those two things for me were so wrapped up in God and sexuality and all of that, to a point that I needed to escape from that. I needed to not be that person anymore. And for a long time, drugs and alcohol allowed me to do that successfully. I had some great times when I was messed up on both drugs and alcohol. But like you said, there comes a point where it no longer worked. Like it no longer worked. And yet now I couldn't stop.
Right.
I always like to talk about this invisible line that I crossed over into addiction, where I no longer had that choice.
Yeah.
If it was there, I was going to do it. And I didn't question why. It was just, that's what happened. If somebody put out a line of cocaine at a party, there was no yes or no. There wasn't am I going to feel bad about this tomorrow? There was none of that, right? There was an undeniable addiction to those things that wasn't always there previously. For a long time, drugs and alcohol really did work. They were my solution for a long time. And when they didn't work and I couldn't stop, my options are to either seek help to try to stop this or to continue, because those were my only two choices. And I think that everyone experiences that to some degree who's gone through addiction and alcoholism. And that's what we call rock bottom, right? Like when I get to my rock bottom, whatever that looks like for me or you or anyone else, it can look different for anyone. I have a lady friend in Coeur d'Alene who was going to meetings and would talk about being an alcoholic, and she only ever had a glass of wine a day. And people were like, well, you can't be an alcoholic if you only drank a glass of wine a day. And I loved her response. She said, no, but you don't understand. I had to have that glass of wine a day. I couldn't not. There was never a time when I couldn't not have that. And so it doesn't matter how much somebody does or drinks or experiences. It doesn't matter how often. It's that feeling. What's the root of that problem that got me to that place where now I cannot quit doing this thing, whatever it is? It could be gambling. It could be sex. It's lots of things for people, across the gamut of human experience. It doesn't always have to be necessarily a substance, but, we seek that which comforts us, right? And for a long time, drugs and alcohol comforted me. And when those things don't work anymore and you can't get out of that, you're left in a quandary.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people die from this, and I know you have too. For me, I had to have help. I had to have help. You asked what changed and was there a healing process? Yeah, definitely. Like the things that I used to feel shame about or guilt about, right? Shame and guilt are these human things that just gnaw at our very soul and live in our brain. And we don't want to ever talk about these things. And I'll never tell somebody this thing. Once I was able to get that out and release it to another human being and to my higher power, the power went away on those things. I don't feel those guilts and shames of the things that I've done in my past. They're actually tools that I can use to help someone else now. I can say, yes, I did this too, right?
Did you just talk to somebody else in AA or did you go to counseling? I'm curious about that. Did you find the answers with other alcoholics?
For me, I did. I know that there's no monopoly on how people get sober or how they stay sober, and whatever someone needs, they should pursue in terms of help. I've had friends that have gotten sober through church experiences. I've had friends gotten sober through psychoanalysis or psychology or psychiatry. I've had friends get sober through proper medication for mental illness. For me, it did come down to, working the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, where part of that is exploring all of these things, right? This moral inventory of things that I've done in my past that I felt shame and guilt for, or that I needed forgiveness for. And then talking to another human being about that and finding out, how do I now make amends for these things in my past?
Yeah.
And then doing that, turning around and saying, hey, I know I haven't seen you in years, but I did this and I need to know how to make this right. It's not even apologizing, right? It's not apologizing. It's saying, how do I make this right with you? And just those experiences, oh my God, I could go into just a list of it, miraculous experiences I've had with telling someone how I harmed them and asking what I could do to make it right and what that looked like afterwards.
Yeah.
Miracles, definitely. There's no denying in my reality now that miracles happen because of that.
I'm just choked up thinking about lifting that burden off yourself. I can think of people I should be contacting. I don't even know what I did. I just know there's something there. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. Yeah. And that's a lifelong process, I think. I've gotten a little better at it since I have some experience with that under my belt, to where now, I can, this is so weird. When I started studying myself about how much I lied, little white lies, especially at work, because I was a manager, to get what I wanted out of my employees, I'd have little white lies and stuff, or for no reason at all, right? We lie for no reason. We're human. That's such a weird thing that humans do.
That is so weird. I know that though. Yeah.
But we do. We all do it too. I don't know of anyone who hasn't lied just for lying's sake and then been like, why the heck did I even lie about that? There was no reason.
Especially because the truth would serve just as well or better sometimes.
Exactly. Absolutely.
I did it a lot when I was little. And, looking back, you're like, I think the truth would have been so much better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when I started looking at that portion of my, character defects, if you will, I started noticing that whenever I would tell a little white lie to someone, I'd hear this like ding in my head, and it was audible. Ding, there you go, lying again. Ding, there you go. So I started to address it immediately. I remember the first couple of times I did it, I was at work. I was managing Cyrus Solari's downtown, and I said something to someone. I don't remember what the lie was, but I remember hearing that ding, and I turned to walk away. And then I turned back around. I said, actually, that was a lie. And they were like, what? I said, that was a lie. I think I just said that to make myself look better, but the truth is this. And I said the truth. And they were like, okay. They were very taken aback that someone was telling them that they just lied. And I think they were taken aback because they probably do it too. We all live in a realm of trying to connect with people. And we think that they don't want to hear the truth, that they want to hear some grandiose, story instead of the truth. And the truth always serves us better. That's what I found.
I'm going to get to how great you are and where you're at now, but you have been homeless. Is that correct? I've had it hard, but not that hard. I remember in my first marriage, we couldn't use paper towels because they were too expensive to use a rag. I've almost lost my house a couple of times. I'm just a step away from homelessness.
Right. Growing up, my family was poor. We were very low class on the monetary schedule. So we never had many things. That was never an issue for me. And I've never risen into middle class either. Yeah. Still to this day, and nor do I care to. It doesn't matter to me. Through all my drinking and drugging, I maintained jobs. I was really good at, lying. Mm-hmm. I was really good at lying. And so I was able to maintain jobs for the most part. I lost a few jobs, but I'd get one soon after that. But the notion of having to constantly pay rent didn't occur to me sometimes. And I just found people in that circle of drug use that were like, well, you can just stay with me for a while. And that doesn't mean, now I know this, it doesn't mean I want you to be my roommate. That's not what that means.
Now you know.
Now I know. Knowing is half the battle. Even at my worst, even in my homelessness, I was still blessed beyond most people who experience homelessness, for sure. I always had a couch to stay on. I think I stayed outside one time and I convinced myself that it was by choice. What it really was is the guy I was hanging out with had a bunch of drugs and he didn't have a home. And he's like, let's just stay here under the bridge. And I'm like, cool. That's cool, man. We're rebels. No, I really just didn't have a couch to go to that night.
I see.
So I was never unhoused when I say I was homeless. I just didn't have a place that was mine for a good stretch of time, probably a year and a half, 2 years, where I was constantly looking for a floor to sleep on, really. And sometimes that was in very unscrupulous places. And sometimes it was in very, very nice places. Like the people that do drugs,
they can afford them.
Sometimes have a lot of money. Yeah. And I learned how to weasel my way into those kind of relationships too. Mm-hmm. I did that quite often, actually. When I first got sober, a lot of people were saying, you have to change everything. You have to change all your friends, all the places that you hang out. You have to change all of this stuff. And I was like, screw that. These are my friends. I don't care if they're going to still do drugs or drink. I am not going to change those things. Mm-hmm. What I found was that after I got clean and sober, many people didn't want to hang out with me. And I think part of that was that perhaps in those early years of sobriety, I probably wasn't as fun a person as I thought I was. That was probably part of it. Part of it was I've realized now too, that when you get clean and sober and you're surrounded by people that you know well and intimately, and they still drink and use, they, I think, have a hard time processing their own issues that they might be going through. Not that I'm judging. I'm just saying, I was a stark reminder to some people of what they're going through, and they didn't want to confront that at the time. Interestingly enough, I think there were 8 people within a 4-year period at that restaurant and bar that I worked at that got clean and sober and still are.
Oh, awesome.
So I lost a lot of friends, but I gained this whole new plethora of people around me who were also working to have a better life, I thought I'd never draw again. I remember being so scared when I first got sober. I was like, I'm never going to be funny again. And I'm never going to create art again.
Oh, wow.
I remember distinctively really worried about those two things, because those two things for me were so wrapped up in drugs and alcohol. I could be completely hilarious and I could create anything you wanted to visually, artistically when I was on drugs and alcohol. And I will say that for me, that did happen for a brief time until I understood what a life without drugs and alcohol looked like and felt like, and experienced it enough where I was comfortable with it. I don't think I was very funny, and I certainly wasn't very creative. Mm-hmm. I didn't have that in me. And what I found since then, living this for a while, is that I am way funnier and I'm way more creative, and my artistic side is pronounced in ways that it never would have been. My boyfriend's also in recovery. He is 4 years clean and sober. And so we speak the same language in terms of that. He's not an artist or a spiritual person or anything like that. We're very, very diametrically opposed on so many things. But one thing we agreed on, when we talk about, what would ever drive us to want to do drugs or alcohol again? Because I like having these conversations with him. I want to know where he is on these things. He goes, the idea of mushrooms sounds good, because experiencing the varied colors, everything's so vibrant and brilliant and everything. He goes, but when you and I go hiking up in the wilderness, he goes, I wouldn't want that to be altered.
Right.
I want that experience to be the reality of what it is.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. And
I love that about him and about that perspective, that I no longer have to look for the more vibrant colors in life. I'd like the colors just exactly as they are. I remember in early recovery, after I got like 2 years, I'm like, well, now I know what the answers to everything is, yeah. And that's simply not true, whether it's spirituality or what other people are doing in their substance use. Honestly, I don't have to judge it. I don't even have to just say I don't judge it. I can actually accept that that person is on a different journey than me. And perhaps that includes for them mushrooms or alcohol or pot or acid or cocaine or whatever. That's not part of my journey anymore. But I don't have to, and I don't get to, place judgments or restrictions on what other people's journey looks like. It's such a freeing place to be.
I love that.
I think the friends that I lost are people who think that when someone's journey alters, whether it's good or bad, that they are then judging what someone else's journey looks like. And maybe that was true in my early recovery. I'm sure it was. Not verbally, I might not have said those things, but I'm sure I came across that way. Mm-hmm. The truth of it is, I have friends that drink, and I have friends that use, and I have friends that don't. I have friends that believe and that don't believe and believe differently. And none of that has to affect me.
It's whatever gets you through the day is what I think.
I agree 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
if you could just get through today, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We all have our struggles. And yet I feel, really happy today, but I didn't always feel really happy. Tell me where you are now and what you're doing. You're in a happy relationship.
I am. Absolutely. Yeah. I love him and he loves me. And I've never been able to say both of those things and have them be true. I can say one or the other, but not both of those. I dropped out of college. I had a full ride scholarship and I dropped out the middle of my junior year back in 1992. And I remember that shame, holding on to that guilt. That was the only thing that I could look back in my life and say that I honestly regretted. I still to this day don't regret any of the drugs that I did, any of the back rooms that I stayed in with on a broken mattress with a coffee can to pee in the corner. I don't regret any of that. It really did make me who I am. But losing that scholarship and having been the first person in my family to go to college, really, I held on to that guilt for a long time. So when I got sober, I went back to college. I did it all online while I was managing a restaurant. And I went to Lake City Playhouse, which is actually where you and I met.
Yeah.
I went there for a show. I hadn't been in a theater in 20 years. And I walked in and saw Sweeney Todd the musical there. And I just fell in love with it. I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot how much I love theater and what magic this is. And so I got on their mailing list. And the next week, they sent out audition notices for Les Mis, which was one of my favorite musicals. So I auditioned and got 8 little tiny roles in the ensemble, and then auditioned for the next show and got one of the leads.
Awesome.
And then I got asked by the guy that ran that theater. He goes, would you paint a set for me? And so I was like, I don't know how to paint. He goes, well, you're an artist though, and I'll pay you good money. And so I would get up in the morning and work the lunch shift at Tomato Street and leave at 5:00. And I'd go and I'd do the shows from 7 till about 10. And then I'd drive from Coeur d'Alene over here to Spokane, and I'd paint this set from 11 p.m. till about 3 a.m. every morning for 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
That was my first experience getting back in the theater artistically. And then he hired me to be his resident designer. And that's taken me all over the US. I've designed in lots of different states. Some of my work's gone up to an opera house in Canada. When I moved back from Texas, I was down there for 3 years. I was the resident designer at the Public Theater of San Antonio, a big equity house down there. My grandbaby was being born. They had lost a child the year before that they had named after me. And I was so heartbroken that I wasn't up here for them for that process. And so when I found out that I was having another grandbaby, I was like, I got to be there for them. And certain stars aligned just in the ways that stars do to make it just the right choice to come back. It was definitely like put in front of me that this is the path that was to come back to Spokane. So I came back here and I got off the plane, and my friend Troy Nickerson, who's the local director, said, I want you to come and audition for Three Penny Opera that we're doing at Stage Left Theater. And I'd seen one show at Stage Left years ago, but I hadn't really ever been in there much. And so I got one of the leads in that show. And during that process, during that show run, the artistic director of Stage Left, who's a dear friend of mine, said that he was going to be retiring in January and that I should take over that position. They asked for resumes, and me and a couple other guys submitted resumes. And I remember going and interviewing with the board of directors. This was beginning of December 2019. And it was the best interview I've ever had in my life, because I went in and I said, I'm just going to be exactly who I am. Like, I do know about running a business. I am an artist. I do know theater inside and out. I have been doing this for years. There was no issues of, am I good enough? There was no issues of, oh my gosh, what if I don't get this job? There was none of that. There was just like, I'm just going to go in and talk to these people and just be myself. And they loved that.
Yeah.
It was just amazing how I connected with those people, and they hired me the next day. So I took over Stage Left Theater in January of 2020, just before COVID shut us down. So I got 2 shows under my belt in terms of being the artistic director there, and then had to pivot into what the new pandemic reality looked like. So we've been doing streamed online productions. We've been doing online festivals, workshops, all sorts of things online. We're getting ready to start our new season in 2022. Big, awesome season that I'm super excited about. The theater just won the Spokane Arts Award for Inclusion because of the work that we've done over the last 2 years. I was nominated 2 years in a row for leadership in the Spokane arts community, which is just like, whose life am I living? You know, sometimes I have to pinch myself. Like, this is my reality, is that I don't say any of those things pridefully. I think you know that about me. I say them humbly because I'm just like, I am blessed with such an amazing life journey. I'm so glad I didn't quit. I'm so glad I didn't give up. I love what you said. If I can just get through today, just 24 hours, that's all I have to worry about. I don't have to think about tomorrow, and I don't have to regret the past. I have doors open in front of me that I didn't know that there were doors for. When I said yes to one thing, first being recovery, let's say that was the first door, a door opens up and now there's 3 doors in front of me. I'm like, oh my God, I could go back to college. Oh my gosh, I can be a good parent to this troubled teen. Oh my gosh, I can have a healthy relationship, right? Those doors weren't available to me before. It's not that I didn't choose them. They weren't there.
Right.
And now those doors are open. So I walk through those doors and I'm like, oh my gosh, I could actually not care about giving up a $50,000 a year job, and I could become an $18,000 a year job artist and enjoy what I do. I can do that. I didn't know that before, and once that door opens, it's just this continuation of just get to that one door and open that one door, right? That next right thing. And I open that one door and so many more opportunities present themselves that were not available. It's not even that I was blind to them. They weren't there. They weren't available to me. And I think I got so wrapped up in my early drug use, thinking that, oh, I just ruined my college career. Oh, now life's ruined. I'm never going to have a new car. That used to matter to me. Just not anymore. I'm never going to have someone who loves me for who I am. I'm never going to be able to be honest with them. I'm never going to be able to talk to God anymore because God hates queers. All of these things, these restrictions and boundaries that I placed around myself. I put myself in this column of cement and there were no doors. There were just no doors.
You just reminded me that when I was going to AA, I had so much shame. And I remember my kids were in the house and I went out to my car and I was crying and I was talking to my sister and I said, God could never forgive me. And she said, nothing to forgive you for. And that changed everything for me. That little thing changed everything. Then there was more doors open because of that one sentence.
Yeah. Those things weren't available before to you.
There's so much shame. And then to just be free of it, we're all doing the best we can. It's just those series of sucking a little less each day.
I've had to learn to extend that grace to people that I completely disagree with. They too are doing the best that they have to work with. Their journey doesn't look like mine.
So Byron Katie really has taught me this. She's always about living in the moment, this very moment, because everything else is a movie. The past is a movie, and what we're thinking about the future is a movie. So only this moment is the only thing that matters. And when somebody talks about, well, how can my father do this or whatever? If you believed what your father believed, then you would act the way your father acts. I believe what I believe, which makes me think the way I think. That's all. I don't know if I'm right or not.
I know. We get so wrapped up in thinking that because we feel right about something that we think or believe, that is the right way and that others must conform or they are wrong. And I've been so wrong in so many things in my life that I know that isn't true anymore. I think there's a grace that comes with that. When Alex and I first got together, he doesn't believe in a concept of God. I'm just going to throw that out there. And he wouldn't mind my talking about this either. And I remember talking to my sponsor, my AA sponsor, about this and saying, I've always wanted to be with somebody that had a sense of God, whatever that looked like. He believes in cosmic power and nature and all sorts of other higher than self things. But it was something that I struggled with when we first started dating. And my sponsor said, so does your concept of God look like it looked like when you were 10? I'm like, no, not at all. And she said, does your concept of God look like it looked like when you first got sober? I'm like, oh, no way. She goes, does your concept of God look like it looked like 5 years ago? I'm like, okay, now I see where you're going with this. He's like, can you not allow other people to have their journey with whatever that higher power looks like in their life?
So beautiful. I love that. Yeah.
I get to allow other people to be on their journey. And sometimes I fail. Sometimes I judge people, especially on Facebook. It's so insidious, this notion of, that's wrong, and I'm going to tell you why. And those days I don't feel as free as I do when I just let things be.
Oh, do you feel the need to tell people sometimes on Facebook?
Oh yeah, you should follow me sometime on Facebook.
I've been to Stage Left and have seen so many great things there. I can't wait till it opens back up. When does it open back up?
We have a one-person show that's going to be filmed again. And then we're bringing back one of the one-person shows that we did back in January called An Iliad. It was our first streamed production, and we learned a lot. It was good. It was good. The actor and director were great. Our tech side of it, we learned a lot after that,
Yes.
you know? And so we're bringing that back live the beginning of December, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th for a 3-day event. And then our season will open January 14th with a show called Corpus Christi. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it was written by Terrence McNally, a prolific gay author back in 1998. It won the Pulitzer Prize, Tony Award, all of that. And it's a retelling of the Jesus story.
Oh, cool.
And it's 13 people on stage who represent Jesus and his 12 apostles. And they also play all these different other characters because it's very modernized. But it was boycotted back in the late 90s because it had 13 gay men portraying Jesus' apostles. And people just freaked out about that. And that the show has morphed and changed over the years to be a lot more inclusive of different gender identities and sexual orientations and things like that. So we're not sure exactly how we're going to present it in terms of who plays these characters on stage. But, you know, Stage Left, man, we push the boundaries. Yeah. So I think that it's going to be very interesting, the cast that we bring together. And the show is lovely. It is lovely. And it's really an exploration of what God's love is for humanity, no matter who that human is. That's really the stuff. I'm going to get teary-eyed just thinking about it.
Me too. You're talking about it.
It's just a really beautiful story about how God loves everyone, regardless of everything. There's no limit to God's love for his creation. So it's told in just a beautiful, tragic story as well. You know, it is a retelling of the Jesus story, but I hope it just gives some insight. You know, I call myself a gay follower of the path of Jesus. If I'm going to, in a nutshell, describe my spirituality, that's kind of what my journey looks like. And so this show for me is a real personal show about getting to share a perspective from not necessarily a Christian standpoint, but a Jesus standpoint, and what that looks like for me personally and what it can look like for anyone. And then we close out the season next year with the Rocky Horror Show. So like we run the whole gamut of like weirdness at our little theater. I love it. I love everything that we get to create there and how we get to be inclusive of everyone. It's just a real blessing and a joy.